Boom! Hey, how you doing? I'm Thundercloud here in the Seedy Horse Medicine Cafe at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rains. Everyone knows Mum calls me James. Hey, let's have some fun and linguistic games here on this Chillin Tuesday. Hey, well, what have I got for you tonight? Tonight, CJ Dennis on this 4th of the 4th, 2023. Yes, pretty much 100 years after CJ Dennis was writing his poetry. I'm going to be celebrating him once again. So, who was CJ Dennis? Well, let's get the formalities out of the way first. Very important too. Recognise the continuing connection to the land of the elders past, present and emerging, that namely being the Kamilaroi and the Banbai people, to acknowledge that the sovereignty of these people has never been ceded and that what is currently being asked for is a treaty before a voice in any constitution. And if you read the Makarrata Uluru statement from the heart, you will see that what is being asked for is substantive constitutional change and a treaty, of course, before any voice, because the voice is a lot like the recognised situation that was tried to be promoted a few years ago. All right, well, tonight though, I'm celebrating CJ Dennis's book, The Glugs of Gosh, and on Chillin Tuesday, and this will only be part one because it's a rather large book. Now, CJ Dennis was, well, his full name, Clarence Michael James Stanislaus Dennis, born the 7th of September 1876, died the 22nd of June 1938. So he's better known as CJ Dennis. He was a well-known poet and a journalist for his best-selling verse novel, The Songs of a Sentimental Bloke, which was 1915. And his contemporaries were Banjo Paterson and Henry Lawson. So if you'd ask anyone, who are some famous Australian poets, they're going to say Banjo Paterson, Henry Lawson, Judith Ryder, Judy Noonacle. But CJ Dennis is very important at the time, and he still is very important. Well, Songs of a Sentimental Bloke was a poem about, a couple that go off to see the Romeo and Juliet at the theatre. But CJ Dennis wrote this poetry in this Australian vernacular slang of the time, so you had to interpret it and read it as it was using that slang. And then later on, the Glugs of Gosh in 1917, and that's what I'm going as well as the moods of Ginger Mick, Doreen, Digger Smith, and a whole lot of other stuff, as well as a book for kids. So tonight, what I am celebrating of CJ Dennis is this book here, The Glugs of Gosh. I won't be reading the whole thing tonight because of copyright, but you will be able to catch the rest of it in a future episode of Chillin Tuesdays coming up soon, next week in fact. So this copy was of the Glugs of Gosh was published by Angus and Robertson Modern Poets in, goodness gracious, 1993. And the dedication from CJ Dennis was to his wife, to my wife. And So I'll read you the introduction first. The Glugs of Gosh is a masterpiece, not just an Australian masterpiece and not just C.J. Dennis's masterpiece. It's a masterpiece of our language, and it will be a surprise to many people that it was created by a writer still associated with the particularly Australian idiom of his most popular character, the sentimental bloke. The Glugs of Gosh describes the journey of our society in the 20th century. It is all the more remarkable that it was written and published so early in the 1900s. Dennis could already see the problems in our systems of education, trade, defence and democracy. He was concerned that his earlier work, The Moods of Ginger Mick, had been used to support the case for war, and he was keen to put the record straight about his own view. In The Glugs, Dennis gives us a hero who would be at home much later in the century when we began to understand at last our individual spirituality and the significance of our natural environment. In a comprehensive social satire that touches all of the major social issues, from the nature of government and justice to education and trade, Dennis's observations about domestic possessions are possibly the earliest of the kind that were developed by Barry Humphries so effectively nearly half a century later. Despite the phenomenal success of the Songs of a Sentimental Bloke, 1915, and The Moods of Ginger Mick, 1916, and a universally enthusiastic critical reception, The Glugs of Gosh was only moderately well received by the public when it was first published in 1917. Dennis himself was undoubtedly disappointed and is reported to have remarked, "Oh well, that's for later when people wake up to themselves. Maybe it'll take on in 100 years. The 100 years have not passed, but perhaps we've not woken up sufficiently to appreciate the Glugs. Nevertheless, it is depressing for aspiring satirists to think that we learn so reluctantly, and that the rapier thrust cannot provoke the insensitive target. Anyone who knows the Glugs of Gosh treasures it with a special affection, and for those who are about to discover this delight for the first time, we envy you. There is even a group of theatre lovers who meet regularly in Sydney to call themselves the Glugs. Each week they invite a guest at their lunch to read an extract. Read the Glugs aloud, alone or with others. Read it over and over. Read it on trains and buses and gasp and giggle to the envy of all. Quote it to a colleague and competitor. Share it with young and old. Relish the rollicking rhythms of the range of exquisite rhymes, for it is easy to miss the skill behind the meticulous construction and precision in the selection of each word and phrase when we are swept away by the plot and the characters. John Durham, Blue Mountains, 1993. All right. C.J. Dennis, The Glugs of Gosh, Chapter 1, The Glug Quest. The Glug Quest. Follow the river and cross the ford. Follow again to the wobbly bridge, turn left at the notice board, climbing the cow track over the ridge, tiptoe soft by the little red house, hold your breath if they touch the latch, creep to the slip rails still as a mouse, then run like mad for the bracken patch. Worm your way where the fern fronds tall. Fashion a lace work over your head, hemming you in with a green high wall. Then when the thrush calls once, stop dead. Ask of the old grey wallaby there, him prick-eared by the woolly butt tree, how to encounter a glug and where the county of Gosh, famed Gosh may be. But if he is scornful, if he is dumb, harsh, there's another way left, then come. On a white, still night, where the dead tree bends over the track like a waiting ghost, travel the winding road that wends down to the shore on an eastern coast. Follow it down where the wake of the moon kisses the ripples of silver sand. Follow it on where the night seas croon a traveller's tale to the listening land. Step not jauntily, not too grave, till the lip of the languorous sea you greet. Wait till the wash of the 13th wave tumbles a jellyfish out at your feet. Not too hopefully, not forlorn, whisper a word of your earnest quest. Shed not a tear if he turns in scorn and sneers in your face like a fish possessed. Hist! Hope on, there is yet a way. Brooding jellyfish won't be gay. Wait till the clock in the tower booms 3, and the big bank opposite gnashes its doors, then glide with a gait that is carefully free by the great brick building of 17 floors. Haste by the draper who smirks at his door, straining to lure you with sinister force, turns up the lane by the second-hand store, and halt by the light bay carrier's horse. By the carrier's horse with the long sad face, and the wisdom of years in its mournful eye, bow to him thrice with a courteous grace. Proffer your querying, pause for reply, eagerly ask for a hint of the glug. Pause for reply with your hat in hand. If he responds with a snort and a shrug, strive to interpret and understand. Rare will a carrier's horse condescend, yet there's another way, on to the end. Catch the 4:30, your ticket in hand, punched by the porter who broods in his box. Journey afar to the sad, soggy land, wearing your short silk lavender socks. Wait at the creek by the moss-grown log, till the blood of the slain day reddens the west. Hark for the croak of a gentleman frog, of a corpulent frog with a white satin vest. Go, as he guides you over the marsh, treading with care on the slithery stones, heedless of night, winds moaning and harsh, that seize you and freeze you and search for your bones. On to the edge of a still dark pool, banishing thoughts of your warm wool rug, gaze to the depths of it placid and cool, and long in your heart for one glimpse of a glug. Crook! Was he mocking you? Crook! Crook! Well, return, and it's past 10 o'clock. Choose you a night when the intimate stars carelessly prattle of cosmic affairs, flat on your back with your nose pointing Mars. Search for the star who fled south from the bears. Gaze for an hour at that little blue star, giving him cheerfully wink for his wink. Shrink to the size of the being you are. Sneeze if you have to, but softly, then think. Throw wide the portals and let your thoughts run over the earth like a galloping herd. Bounds to profundity, let there be none. Let there be nothing too madly absurd. Ponder on pebbles or stock exchange shares, on the mission of man or the life of a bug, on the planets or billiards, policemen or bears, alert at the time for the sight of a glug. Meditate deeply on soft goods or sex, on caraway seeds or the causes of bills, biology, art or mysterious wrecks, or the tattered white fleeces of clouds on blue hills. Muse upon ologies, freckles and fog, why hermits live lonely and grapes in a bunch, on the ways of a child or the mind of a dog, or the oyster you bolted last Friday at lunch. Heard you no sound like a shuddering sigh, or the great shout of laughter that swept down the sky? Saw you no sign of the wide Milky Way? Then there's naught left to you now but to pray. Sit you at eve when the shepherd in blue calls from the west to his chattering sheep, then prays for the moods that old mariners woo, for the thoughts of young mothers who watch their babes sleep. Pray for the heart of an innocent child, for the tolerant scorn of a weary old man, for the petulant grief of a prophet reviled, for the wisdom you lost when your whiskers began. Pray for the pleasures that he who was you found in the mud of a shower-fed pool, for the fears that he felt and the joys that he knew when a little green lizard crept into the school. Pray as they pray who are maddened by wine, for distraction from self and a spirit at rest. Now, deep in the heart of you search for a sign. If there be naught of it, vain is your quest. Lay down by the book, for to follow its tale were to trade in the false blame as all mortals who fail, and may the gods salve you on life's dreary round, for 'tis whispered, who finds not till he shall be found? The end of chapter 1. Chapter 2, Joi, the Glug. That's spelt J-O-I. Joi the Glug. The Glugs abide in a far, far land that is partly pebbles and stones and sand, but mainly earth of a chocolate hue when it isn't purple or slightly blue. And the Glugs live there with their aunts and wives in a drought-proof tenements all their lives. And they climb the trees when the weather is wet to see how high they can really get. Pray don't forget, this is chiefly done when the weather is wet. And every shadow that flits and hides, and every stream that glistens and glides and laughs its way from a highland height, all know the Glugs quite well by sight, for they say, our test is the best by far, for a Glug is a Glug, so there you are. And they climb the trees when it drizzles or hails to get electricity into their nails. And the Glug that fails is a luckless Glug if it drizzles or hails. Now, the Glugs all abide in the land of Gosh, and they work all day for the sake of Splosh. For Splosh the first is the nation's pride, and the king of the Glugs on his uncle's side. And they sleep at night for the sake of rest, for their doctors say this suits them best. And they climb the trees as a general rule, for exercise when the weather is cool. They're taught at school to climb trees when the weather is cool. And whispering grass on the great green hills, and every cricket shrills, and every moonbeam gleaming white, and all know the Glugs quite well by sight. And they say it's safe is the test we bring, for a Glug is awfully Glug-like thing, and they climb the trees when there's a sign of a fog, to scan the land for a feasible dog. They love to jog, the road dwells in the quest of a feasible dog. The Glugs eat meals 3 times a day because their fathers ate that way. Their grandparents said the scheme was good to help the Glugs digest their food. And 'tis wholesome food the Glugs have got, for it says so plain on the tin and pot. And they climb the trees when the weather is dry, to get a glimpse of the pale green sky. We don't know why, but they like to gaze on the pale green sky. And every cloud that sails aloft, and every breeze that blows so soft, and every star that shines at night, all know the Glugs quite well by sight. For they say our test is safe and true. What one Glug does, the other Glugs do. And they climb the trees when the weather is hot, for a bird's eye view of the garden's plot. Of course it's rot, but they love the view of the garden plot. At 2:30 on a Wednesday morn, a most peculiar Glug was born, and later on when he grew a man, he scoffed and sneered at the chosen plan. It's wrong, said this Glug whose name was Joi. Bah, said the Glugs, he's a crazy boy. And they climbed the trees as the west wind stirred, to hark to the note of the guffer bird. It seems absurd, but they're foolishly fond of the guffer bird. And every reed that rustles and sways by the gurgling river that plashes and plays, and the beasts of the dread neurotic night, all know the Glugs quite well by sight. And why, they say, is easily done for a dexter Glugs like a sinister one. And they climb the trees, and they climb the trees, and they bark their knuckles, and they chafe their knees, and 'tis one of the world's great mysteries that things like these get into the serious histories. The end of part 2. Next, the stones of Gosh. There it is. The stones of Gosh. Now, here is a tale of the Glugs of Gosh. And a wonderful tale, I ween, of the Glugs of Gosh and their great King Splosh and Tush, his virtuous queen. And here is the tale of the crafty Ogs in the neighbouring land of Podge, of their sayings and doings and plottings and brewings, and something about Sir Stodge, wise to profundity, stout to rotundity. That was the knight Sir Stodge. Oh, the king was rich and the queen was fair, and they made a very respectable pair. And whenever a Glug in that peaceful land did anything no one could understand, the knight Sir Stodge, he looked in a book and charged that Glug with the crime called crook. And the great Judge Fudge, who wore for a hat the sacred skin of a tortoiseshell cat, and he fined that Glug for his actions rash and frequently asked a deposit in cash. Then every Glug he went home to his rest with his head in a bag and his toes to the west, for they knew it was best, since their grandpas slept with their toes to the west. But all of the tale that is so far told has nothing whatever to do with the Ogs of Podge and their crafty dodge and the trade in pickles and glue. To trade with the Glugs came the Ogs to Gosh, and they said in seductive tones, "Well, we'll sell you pianos and pickles and spanners for 17 shiploads of stones. Smooth-uns or knobbly-uns, firm-uns or wobbly-uns, all we ask is stones." And the king said, "What?" And the queen said, "Why, that's awfully cheap to the things I buy. For the grocer of ours in the light brown hat asked 2 and 11 for pickles like that." But a Glug stood up with a wart on his nose and cried, "Your Majesty's Ogs' foes." But the Glugs cried, "Peace, will you, old jaw? How did our grandpas fashion the law?" Said the knight Sir Stodge as he opened the book, "When the goods were cheap and the goods they took, they fined the Glug with the wart on his nose for wearing a wart with his everyday clothes. And the goods were brought through a Glug named Gones, and the Ogs went home with a load of stones, which they landed in with glee in the land of Podge. Do you notice the dodge? Nor did the Glugs, nor the knight Sir Stodge. In the following summer, the Ogs came back with a cargo of 8-day clocks, and hand-painted screens and sewing machines and mangles and scissors and socks. And they said, "For these excellent things we bring, we're ready to take more stones, and in bricks or road metal, and for goods you will settle, indented by your Mr. Gones." Cried the Glugs praisingly, "Why, how amazingly smart of industrial Gones. Industrious Gones." And the king said, "Hum," and the queen said, "Ooh, that curtain, what a beautiful blue." But a Glug stood up with some very large ears and said, "There is more in this thing than appears, and we ought to be taxing these goods of the Ogs, or our industry soon will be gone to the dogs." And the king said, "Bush, you're an ungluggish and rude." And the queen said, "What an absurd attitude." Then the Glugs cried, "Down with political quacks! How did our grandpas look at a tax?" So the knight Sir Stodge, he opened his book. "No tax," he said, "wherever I look." Then they find the Glug with the prominent ears, for being old-fashioned by several years. And the olds went home with the stones full steam. Did you notice the scheme? Nor yet did the Glugs in their dreamiest dream. Then, every mouth to the land of Gosh, the Ogs, they continued to come, with bitumen and hooks and medical books and rotary engines and rum. Large cases with labels, occasional tables, hair tonic and fiddles and phones. And the Glugs said, concealing their joy in the dealing, paid promptly with nothing but stones. Why, it was screaming, laughable seemingly, asking nothing for nothing but stones. And the king said, "Haw!" And the queen said, "Oh, our drawing room now is heavenly slow of large overmantels and whatnots and chairs and a statue of Splosh at the head of the stairs." But a Glug stood up with a cast in his eyes and said, "Far too many baubles we buy, with all the Gosh factories closing their doors and importers' warehouses lining our shores." But the Glugs cried, "Down with such meddlesome fools! What did our grandpas lay down in their rules?" And the knight, Sir Stodgy, opened his book. "To cheapness," he said, "was the road they took." Then every Glug who was not too fat turned 1700 handsprings and jumped in his hat. They fined the Glug with the cast in his eye for looking both ways, which he did not deny, and for having no visible precedent, which in crime is a crime in the poor and a fault in the rich. So the Glugs continued with greed and glee to buy cheap clothing and pills and tea, till every Glug in the land of Gosh owned 3 clean shirts and a 4th in the wash. But they all grew idle and fond of ease, and easy to swindle and hard to please, and the voice of Joy was a lonely voice when he railed at Gosh for its foolish choice. But the king, great king, grinned, and the good queen gushed, as the royals of Ogs were madly rushed, and the knight Sir Stodge, with a wave of his hand, declared it a happy and prosperous land. The end of Chapter 3 of The Glugs of Gosh by C.J. Dennis. Chapter 4, Sym, the Son of Joi. Sym, the son of Joi. Now Joi, the rebel, he had a son in far Gosh, where the tall trees wave. Said Joi, "In Gosh there shall yet be one to scorn this life of a self-made slave, to spurn the law of the knight Sir Stodge, and the end rule of the great King Splodge. Who shall warn the Glugs of their crafty dodge, and at last bring peace, sweet peace to Gosh?" Said he, "Whenever the kind sun showers his golden treasures on grateful flowers, with upturned faces and hearts bowed low, the Glugs shall know what the wild things know." Said he, "Wherever the broad fields smile, they shall work with clean minds free of guile. They shall scoff aloud as the call of greed, and turn to their labourers and never heed." So Joi had a son, and his name was Sym, and his eyes were wild as the eyes of truth. And there came to the wandering mind of him long thoughts of the riddle that vexes youth. "And, Father," he said, "in the old man's din, is there aught of pleasure? Do you find some joy?" But his father tilted the beardless chin and looked in the eyes of the questing boy. Said he, whenever the fields are green, lie still where the wild rose fashions a screen, while the brown thrush calls to his love-wise mate, and know what they profit who trade with hate. Said he, whenever the great skies spread in the beckoning vastness overhead, a tent for the blue wren building a nest, then down in the heart of you learn what's best. And there came to Sym as he walked afield deep thoughts of the world and the folk of Gosh. He saw the idols to which they kneeled, he marked them cringe in the name of Splash. Is it meet, he asked, that a soul should crawl to a purple robe on a gilded chair? But his father walked to the garden's wall and he stopped to a rose bush flowering there. Said he, whenever a bursting moon looks up from the sun, may a soul room find for a measure of awe at the wondrous birth of one more treasure to this glad earth. Said he, whenever a dewdrop clings to a gossamer threads and glitters and swings, deep in humility bow your head to a thing for a blundering mortal's dead. And there came to Sym in his later youth, with the first clear glance in the face of guile, thirst for knowledge and thoughts of truth, of gilded baubles and things worthwhile. And he said, there is much that a Glug should know, but his mind has clouded, his years are few. Then Joi, the father, he answered low, as his thoughts ran back to the youth he knew. Said he, whenever the west wind stirs and the birds in feathers and beasts in furs steal out to dance in the glade, lie still. Let your heart teach you what it will. Said he, whenever the moonlight creeps through inlaced boughs and the shy star peeps adown from its crib in the crawling sky, known of their folly who fear to die. Now, interest came to the mind of Sym as midst fellows he lived and toiled, but the ways of Glug folk puzzled him. For some won honour, while some were foiled. Yet all were filled with vague unrest, and they climbed their trees in an endless search. But Joi, the father, he mocked their quest when he marked a Glug on his hard-won perch. He said, whenever these tales are heard of the feasible dog with the guffer bird, then laugh and laugh till the fat tears roll, till to the roots of the joy bush deep in your soul. When you see them squat on the treetops high, scanning forever that heedless sky, lie fat on your back on the good green earth, and roll till the great vault echoes your mirth. And he walked in the city to Sym. There came sounds envenomed with fear and hate, shouts of anger and words of shame, as Glug blamed Glug for his woeful state. This blame, said Sym, is mortal's right, to blame for his fellow for aught to be. But the father said, do we blame the night when darkness gathers and none can see? Said he, whenever there springs from earth a plant all crooked and marred at birth, shall we, unlearned in the gardener's scheme, blast plant or earth for the faults that seem? Said he, whenever your wandering eye look out on the glory of earth and sky, shall you, midst the blessing of fields abloom, fling blame at the blind man prisoned in gloom? So Joi had a son, and his name was Sym, far from the ken of the great King Splash. And small was the Glug's regard of him, mooning along in the streets of Gosh. But many a creature by field and ford shared in the schooling of that strange boy, dreaming and planning to gather and hoard knowledge of all things precious to joy. The end of chapter 4 of the Glugs of Gosh. All right, one more chapter. We'll go on to chapter 5 and then we'll call it quits there for the evening. Chapter 5, the Growth of Sym. The Growth of Sym. Now, Sym was a Glug, and 'tis mentioned so that the tale reads perfectly plain as we go. In his veins ran blood of that stupid race of docile folk who inhabit the place, called Gosh, and Gosh, where the tall trees sigh with a strange significant sort of cry when the gloaming creeps and the wind is high. When the deep shades creep and the wind is high and the trees bow low as the gods ride by. Gods of the gloaming who ride on the breeze stop to hearten the birds and the trees. But each dull Glug sits down by his door and mutters, "'Tis windy," and nothing more, like the long dead Glugs in the days of yore. When Sym was born there was much to do, and his parents thought him a joy to view, but folk not prejudiced saw the Glug, and his nurse remarked in the cut of his mug, for he had their hair, and he had their eyes, and the Glug expression of pain surprise, and their predilection of pumpkin pie. And his parents' claim were a deal denied by his maiden aunt on his mother's side, a Glug lady of 52, with a slight moustache of an auburn hue. Parental blither, she said quite flat, he's an average Glug and he's red and fat, and exceedingly fat and red at that. But the father, Joi, when he gazed on Sym, dreamed great and wonderful things for him. Said he, if the mind of a Glug could wake, then oh, what a wonderful Glug he'd make. We shall teach his laddie to play life's game with a different mind and a definite aim, a Glug in appearance, yet not the same. But the practical aunt said, "Fudge, you fool. We'll pack up his dinner and send him to school. He shall learn about 2 times and passing and capes and how to make money with inches on tapes. We'll apprentice him then to the drapery trade, where I've quite heard it reported large profits are made. Besides, he can sell us cheap buttons and braid." So, poor Sym, he was sent to school, where the first thing taught is the golden rule. Do unto others, the teacher said, then suddenly stopped and scratched his head. You may look up at the rest in a book, he said. At present, it doesn't occur to me, but do it, whatever it happens to be. And now, said the teacher, the day's task brings consideration of practical things. If a man makes profit of £15 on 1 week's taking from 2 milk rounds, how many? And Sym went dreaming away to the sunlit lands where field mice play and wrens hold revel the livelong day. He walked in the welcoming fields alone, while from far, far away came the pedagogue's drone. If a man makes multiply abstract nouns from B, take population of towns, rods, poles or perches, derived from Greek. Oh, the hawthorn beds came out this week, and robins are nesting down by the creek. So, Sym was head of his class not once, and his auntie repeatedly dubbed him dunce. But give him a chance, said his father, Joi. His head is abnormally large for a boy. But his aunt said, fiffle, it's crammed with bosh. Why, he don't know the rivers and mountains of Gosh, nor the names of the nephews and King Splosh. In Gosh, when a youth gets a obstinate look and copies of his washing bill into a book, he blackens his boot heels and frowns at a joke, and he's getting sense, say the elderly folk. But Sym, he would laugh when he ought to be sad, said to his aunt, "Look, a mossy, what's wrong with the lad?" said his aunt. "Like a mossy, what's wrong with the lad? He romps with the pussies and talks to the ants, and keeps his loose change in his second best pants, and stumbles all over my cauliflower plants." "There is wisdom in that," laughed the father, Joi. But the aunt said, "Toity, and drat that boy, he shall play," said the father, "some noble part, who knows, but it may be in letters or art. 'Tis a dignified business to make folk think," but the aunt cried, "What? Go messing with ink, and smear his fingers and take to drink, paint hussies and cows, and end in the clink." So the argument ran. But one bright spring day, Sym settled it all his own strange way. "'Tis a tramp," he announced, "I've decided to be, and I start next Monday at 20 to 3. When the aunt recovered, she screamed, "A tramp! A low-life, pilfering, idle scamp who steals people's washing and sleeps in the dam." Sharp to the hour, Sym was ready and dressed. "Young birds," sighed the father, "must go from the nest. When the green moss covers those stones you tread, when the green grass whispers above my head, mark well wherever your path may turn. They've reached the valley of peace who learn that wise hearts cherish what fools may spurn." So Sym went off, and a year went by, and the father said with a smile, masked sigh, "It is meet that the young should leave the best." Said the aunt, "Don't spill that soup on your vest, nor mention his name. He's our one disgrace, and he's probably sneaking around some place with fuzzy black whiskers all over his face." But under the hedge by a flowering peach, a youthful with a little blue wren held speech, with his back to a tree and his feet in the grass. He watched the thistle down drift and pass, as the cloud puffs borne on the lazy breeze move by their errand above the trees into the vault of the mysteries. "Now teach me, little blue wren," he said, "'tis you can unravel this riddle for me. I am amazed by the gifts of this kindly earth. Which of them all has the greatest worth?" He flirted his tail as he answered them. He bobbed and bowed to his only coy little hen. "Why, sunlight and worms," said the little blue wren. Well, that's part one of the Glugs of Gosh by C.J. Dennis, and I'm going to read the rest of you to that next week on Chilling Tuesday, and pick it up off the floor and finish it off next week on Chillin' Tuesday. Hey, so don't forget that coming up in August this year, August 16th and 17th, we've got a heat of the Australian Poetry Slam. And as well as that, in November 9, 10, 11th, we've got an Australian Poetry Festival here in Guyra. Yes, it's true. So, hey, if you like that, so far what I've read out of the Glugs of Gosh, give this a thumbs up, leave a comment, And yeah, it helps with the metrics of the you know, YouTube and stuff like that. It helps get the word out there. And this is certainly a classic Australian verse novel that really should be celebrated, and for the particular reasons mentioned in the preface and the foreword at the beginning. All right, I'm Thundercloud here. I'm finishing off Chillin Tuesday here on Tuesday the 4th of the 4th, 2023. Yes, and yep, I'm out of here like a lightning. Boom, boom.